What kind of learning curve can you expect from someone who's an experienced iron sight pistol shooter and they're going to transition to a red dot for the first time?
2 hours.
Wow.
You give 2 hours, 2 to 4 hours of like correct instruction on the dot, right? And what they need to do with the dot as far as that and how to pick up the dot in their presentation. Why they may necessarily be having some issues picking up the dot or getting the dot presented well. Like I do the demo in class and I do it all the time. I'm like, so who has an issue picking up the red dot? You know, 1 or 2 people raise their hand. I said, all right, come on up here. I said, all I want you to do is A, B, and C, show them it, look at it, and within 5 to 10 draws, they're 90% on picking up the dot. I'm like, cool, just do that the rest of the day. And then we'll keep tweaking as we go along. It's always been about the grip, the presentation, and how they're focused.
Steve, welcome to the show, man.
Richard, man, it's great to be here.
Hey, I've been kind of following what you're up to for years. We have a lot of mutual friends, but I'm really excited to get to talk to you. You have a very unique background. A lot of people know you from Sentinel Concepts, where you do a lot of training in various disciplines, from carbine to pistol to red dot to shotgun. Seems like I know you more as a shotgun guy. It's a lot of my shotgun buddies that really look up to you and follow what you're doing in that regard. But tell us a little bit about your background, how you first got into firearms. And I know you've been kind of in the industry since the 90s, so that's a good run. But what first got you into firearms as a kid or a young man?
You know, for me, growing up in a big outdoor hunting family, right? Waterfowl hunting, deer hunting, you name it. If it was in season, we hunted it. Right. And that kind of started that course for me very early on. I mean, I grew up shooting a lot of trap skeet, like a lot of us did. And then from there, man, it just kept progressing and on and on and on. It's been nonstop, though. Yeah,
I bet. And you've worked with a lot of companies that are very well known, and you kind of are a go-to guy for like product consultation, product development. How did that get started?
You know, that was kind of crazy. Years back, obviously being in Michigan, right, I have EOTech in the backyard, Trigicon, a lot of other smaller manufacturers in that space. And it just kind of bloomed for me right around the early-ish 2000s. You know, there's times I started doing some stuff with Trigicon. I had courses for their engineers. Some of their design guys had been shooting with me at that point in time. And it just kind of started that progression from there. You know, a lot of good feedback with those guys off and on through the years. And then it just snowballs like everything else in this industry, right? One company does something, somebody moves to another company, they remember your name, your face, and they start bringing you back on for other projects and programs. And then like it really kind of picked up real heavy, you know, mid-ish to late 2000s during the Magpul era when I was working there as an instructor. And then it just kept going. There's really no rhyme or reason.
Yeah, you know, I want to talk about Magpul for sure, but before we get that, you mentioned some of the companies that you worked with. In what capacity have you worked for those companies? Like, has it mainly been from a consulting basis, or have you actually been employed by these companies? I know with Magpul, you were an instructor and all that, and we'll get to that. But
with a lot of the companies, it became they put you on retainer consulting fees for a lot of them here. You know, we're going to be coming out with this in a year or two, you know, get it out, shoot it a lot, give us more feedback. Let's get rolling design changes done. That's kind of where it all goes for the most part for me. So pretty much everybody, I was on some sort of paid consulting or retainer fee with a lot of those companies. And a few of those companies I was actually employees with over the years for a couple of years on contract.
What did you learn from that process? In other words, what are some of the insights that you were able to get that the average Joe doesn't know about developing a product for our industry?
How do I say it without saying it? But I'll say it. A lot of engineers just build it and then tell you to tell them how good it is. A lot of them start with a good idea fairy and they develop a product and they'll hand you that widget and be like, tell me how good this is, or tell us how this is. Or I'm like, you could have asked us first.
Yeah, hopefully they tell you early enough on, right? Before they've spent all this money in R&D and all that, you know.
No,
but that's usually not the case.
No, it's definitely not the case, right? It's like they come up with widget A. They're like, here, this is going to be the next best thing. I'm like, for who? Like,
but they probably appreciate your honesty because that's what they're looking for at that phase. You know what I mean? The engineer might, but the company probably is, because they would rather figure that out, you know, during initial testing than once it's released. Because we've all seen that too. This big release that, oh no, now we're going to pull this back and reintroduce it. That's not the best way.
No, it's usually not, right. And it's like it's a progressive change through product iterations, you know, over time. But a lot of it is like, A lot of companies also don't like it if you tell them their baby is ugly. It's just the nature of the beast, right? But it's like, if more companies spent more time with the people on the ground, right? And granted, right, a lot of things that we see are kind of recouping cost in R&D development. That may also come from like military contracts or solicitations, right? And they're like, okay, well, we need this. Well, that's great, but it was never designed. And the public gets on the internet and they're like, this is dumb. This is this. It's like, well, it was never designed for you. It was never to be brought to light for you, so to speak. It's just kind of now a recouping of those costs or a slight tweak or redesign to put it into the average citizen market.
And that's usually a pretty easy sell, I think, because my career's been in law enforcement, retired now for a few years, but it seems like the private citizen usually wants what military and law enforcement have been using because they assume that's the best. But mil-spec doesn't always mean top of the line, right? That people might think it believes. It could mean lowest bidder. But seriously, a lot of products that do well in the law enforcement and military sectors, that means that they're robust enough to be sort of overbuilt for the average, private citizen and what they're going to be doing. So I think there is some value in having something that's had a lot of success in military law enforcement. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I agree with that, right? You can take certain, projects and look at them and go, this thing has stood the test of time. Aimpoint optics, right? Other optics manufacturers, a lot of things out there that have been used in the military since the 2000s, right? And even some earlier. Good, solid. They're very robust. If they can take certain, vibration testing, explosions, getting smashed, it's going to generally hold up even longer term for most of the general average user.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder who some of your influences were in the training world. Like maybe you could start early on as you were a relatively new to all this, and then maybe someone that I don't know if you still can continue to train with other instructors, or kind of who are your influences as far as shooting?
It goes back, like for a lot of us, right? We all read the books, right? Obviously, Colonel Cooper, right? You start reading those things, you hear about gun sight at a very, very early age, right? You've got friends that are older at that point in time in your life, and you're like, wow, these guys are going to gun sight, right? So, there's always those readings that start that, right? A lot of the books. I think the first real big push in my world I spent, probably close to 15, 16 plus years with Pat Rogers at EAG Tactical. Right. Pat was a very big influence on my early days of my career, especially in the carbine side of the house, training wise, introduced me to a lot of great companies and people. I AI'd for Pat for years, took classes with Pat, ended up working for Pat for a numerous amount of years after the fact, right up until the day of his death. I was literally on the range teaching his course for him when he died.
Well, I'm envious of you, brother, because he's one of the icons that I always wanted to meet and train with, but sadly that opportunity is no longer there. So yeah, I appreciate that. Tell us a little bit about him and how what he taught resonated with you so much.
Pat was just a great human being, right? A wealth of knowledge, big career, obviously over the decades. I think the biggest thing, it's hard because there's so many points, right, that he really kind of laid on me over the years. And I think the biggest one was, when you think about it, it was kind of an adage, but it was more of a give them what they need versus what they want.
I love that.
That was one of the big ones. And he didn't put it exactly that way, but the way it was, put to me, and I was like, that made sense, right? That absolutely did. And Pat was a big influence over the years. There's many good dudes. I did a lot with Dave Harrington. Dave recently passed as well. Super Dave was a good friend of mine. We had a lot of great talks over the years. That was a rough one as well. There was so many over this time. And, we're getting to that point, my age bracket, I'm 55 now, right? The people that we were with in those time frames are all leaving. Right. And we kind of hear the same thing, like you had mentioned, I would have done this, or I'd like to have done that. And we get it. Life gets in the way and we understand it. But a lot of dudes today are going to be saying those things over the next couple of years, right, in that spectrum.
Same for a mutual friend of ours, Dave Spalding, right?
Yeah.
And I always tease Dave because he's like, hey, this is my last course. This is my last.
I have that for 3 years.
Yeah, I've actually co-taught Dave's last course like 3 times. Yeah. But I think, he, in all seriousness, he's winding down. He doesn't want... Dave and I have been friends for a long time. We met when we were filming Handguns television back in the day. And I had been reading his stuff forever. I got a quick digression to where I met him, because this is someone that knows Dave. You'll laugh at this, and other people, just to give you a little insight into the mind of an old crazy guy. I met him at a SHOT Show at the old Harris Publications little gathering where there were free drinks. So every gun writer, that wrote for Harris was there, including me. So I'm in line with my buddy, Alfredo Rico, who's one of the top photographers in the industry. And I go, hey, I think that's Dave Spalding there, lying in front of us, right? And he goes, oh. I don't even know if he knew who that was, but I introduced myself on my best behavior. Excuse me, Mr. Spalding. My name's Rich Nance. I write for, these publications. It's really good to meet you. I've read your books and everything else. And as he's shaking my hand, he goes, Rich Nance. He goes, yeah, I got to be honest, bro. He goes, your photos are so good, I don't read the articles. And then my photographer was there. So he was like, and so years later, I'm friends with Dave, and I tell his wife this, and she's like, Dave, I don't even remember saying that, honey, but he just, that's typical, but that's Dave. But
I spent a lot of good times with him.
I aspired to sort of do what Dave was doing when I retired from law enforcement. I had a training company that had sort of built up. I had been writing articles since 2008. I started writing for the gun magazines, but I always thought that was kind of a means to an end. And I thought that when I retired, I would sort of travel and teach. And then I see and experience a little bit of that. I'm like, oof, I'm not exactly sure that's where I want to be. People think it's easy, but dude, that's a hard way to make a living. You're living in hotels all the time. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir with you, but it's not all glamorous like people think. I enjoy teaching. That's kind of my favorite thing to do, but I enjoy it in moderation, with all the other stuff that I'm doing. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, obviously you're passionate about training. I know you've done some writing as well. And so talk a little bit about that, about what is it that you like and maybe some things that you don't like about sort of being on the road and taking the show on the road.
It's tough, right? It's not what I would call a glamorous life like a lot of people think it is, right? You're either flying or driving everywhere. You're constantly in and out of airports, hotels, like we said. You're missing holidays, birthdays, whatever the case is, family events, your dog dying. I mean, it's everything, right? It's terrible. It's not. While it is good, right, because there's information that needs to be imparted, and we still love doing it, right? There's a lot of information that needs to still get out. There's a lot of people that look to us for training, for little tidbits and hints of those things that just make a big difference in their life. The writing thing was scarier than training. Honestly, when I started writing back in the day for Surefire's Combat Tactics, 1 or 2 articles for SWAT magazine back when, but that was the scariest thing in the world, was sitting down in front of a computer going, what do I say? How do you do this?
Is it because you think it's like a new format for you? Whereas if you're teaching on the range, you're so comfortable, you've done it 1,000 times, the material inside and out. But when you're writing something, you're sort of like, are people going to critique my grammar? Is the editor going to pick up the mistakes and save me? Or it can be weird. But I think most people would rather write because there's no time crunch. It's not live, and they're not, you know what I'm saying? But here's the thing. When you write something down and it appears in a magazine or even online to some degree,
it's there.
It's there. And I think that's what people get kind of nutted up about, because they start thinking someone's going to second guess me. Someone's going to take what I said out of context. And it's a thing, man. They certainly could.
Oh, it's a very real thing, especially from the writing aspect. She's like, I'm going to put this on paper, right? This is going to go into a magazine. Ichiro Nagata is going to be there taking photos for this. I got to make this thing look really good, but I also have a diligence, right, to tell people the truth about it. And that was a thing, especially with me, because it's like, yes, people are like, oh, you shill for this or you do. I'm like, look, man, if I kept half the things that I ever wrote about or have worked with, I would need 3 houses.
And I think it's funny. I think it's funny, Steve, when people think or they assume that as a writer or as someone who's going to evaluate a product, you're getting like a hand-picked, really excellent, the best version that they have, and they're giving all the other ones to other people. No, I mean, how many products have you had? So I don't.
A lot.
If I get a product and it is a total piece of garbage, I'm probably not going to write an article about what a piece of garbage it is. It's just I'm not going to write about it, And there's things that are like not my favorite, but they're still, like you hit on this earlier, they still have a place because maybe they're inexpensive or maybe they're easy to use or whatever the case is. So just because a product doesn't seem to meet my need or your need doesn't mean it's not going to meet someone's need.
Yeah, it may not be right for us, but somebody needs it, right, out there. That's obviously why some of these things exist, right? Or the good idea fairy showed up to somebody in the middle of the night one night and they're like, we're going to make this widget. And this is going to be, you're not going to get rich. You're not going to make $1 million off this thing. It's just, it's interesting to see how that works today, right? Especially with the internet, right? Because everybody's got a channel, everybody's got something, and they talk about everything. You go, and then you see the dude selling it next week on, Gunbroker or whatever off their accounts are because, well, yeah, but I got to get paid more than what I just did.
Yeah.
We never did this in our early days to get rich. That was for certain, right? We did it to get information out. We did it to get things in public's hands that maybe they weren't as accessible to at the time, but would be in a year or two. And that was really it, honestly, for me. It was a good time, right? Writing for some of the magazines was fun, but training was the passion, right? That was the big thing.
Yeah, same. The one cool thing about writing is, like, I'm sure it's happened to you. You're a very well-known instructor. I'm sure your classes fill up easily. But there are times, especially in the beginning, when I would travel across the country. I remember one class there was 7 students in.
Yes.
So I'm traveling across the country to train 7 students. Because you're just trying to get that traction and that momentum and get some excitement and things like that. But from a cost-effective standpoint, and even from an information standpoint, travel across the country to train 7 people or write an article, which is going to be read by hundreds or maybe potentially thousands of people. Now, granted, they're not going to get as much out of an article as they are a 2-day course. But I would argue even in a 2-day course, even a week-long course, you're not going to just magically by osmosis assume, all of the instructor's knowledge and skills. Hopefully, and Dave Spalding articulates this really well, hopefully you learn enough that you learn what you don't know. You learn something that you need that you didn't know you needed, and you take that information back and you practice. If you don't do that, all you're doing is like a meet and greet, well, I met Steve Fisher and here's a picture of us I put on Instagram and whatever. Okay, well, the information you learn from that course is going to deteriorate if you don't train. So that I think that's important.
It would be completely lost. One of those other things that really stuck with me over the years was something Dave Harrington had mentioned to me. This is back probably 2007 era, right? 5-7 era with some of the first courses that I ever did with Dave. Was that he said, "Hey, dude," like Dave, typical, and he would say to me, he said, "Hey, man, just remember this, dude. Like, teach what you learned, not what you were taught." I said, notebook, right? Write that one down, right? And it's still posted on a noteboard somewhere on the other side of the dungeon here. But that one kind of sunk in as well, right? When you're thinking about this, and Dave Spalding said some of the same things, right? I mean, Dave is a great dude. Love Dave to death. My time together with him has been awesome as well. I've shagged targets for him in class. I've taught classes for him. Had him as a student on some carbine stuff over the years. Great guy. I love his depth of information and knowledge, right? But like little tidbits like that mean all the world of difference to a lot of guys.
What do you think about the difference between an instructor and a teacher, or an instructor and a coach? Because I think there's a huge difference there. In law enforcement, we had so many guys that, for whatever reason, they were in the administration's favor, right? They favored this individual because he did something. Maybe he complimented him on their tie or whatever the case was. But they think this is a good guy. We need to send this guy to some training, make him an instructor. Maybe he'll promote. He's on the path to promotion. So sometimes they'll send people to training when that person doesn't have the aptitude to excel as an instructor in that particular arena. But a lot of what you get from that is people that just parrot information that, as you said, they were taught. So maybe you can give me your thoughts on that.
That debate's been going on for years, right? Between an instructor, a trainer, and a coach, right? I think in most of our circles, we've all had this discussion repeatedly over and over and over. And most of the time, what we get are the guys that are stuck, especially in the LE side of the house, like the institutionalized inbreeding of the past 30 years, because this is the book. It's been passed down for all these years. This is how it's always been. This is how it will always be because it's worked. Well, it's worked in one particular little segment when you got a bunch of 20-year-old kids, and we'll call it that, that never touched a gun before, or they did. Now they're here at the police academy. Right. So they need this hardline instruction when you've only got 40 odd hours with them.
Yeah.
Right. And you've got to do a very compartmentalized thing, but there's no real, what we would call coaching or training them, because we're not teaching them, we're not training them to be free thinkers about things. We're not teaching them, training them, coaching them on a lot of other variables that would happen. But we're just giving them the book basic. Here you go. Now you're going to pass the qual.
Yeah, absolutely. That and then that's a whole other rabbit hole as far as qualification versus training. But one of the things that's interesting, and one of the things that I like about teaching my own material, and I say my own material because none of us invented anything, right? We just have our own take on what we learned from someone else. Biggest influences on me have been Kelly McCann from the combative stuff and the combative pistol stuff, and Dave Spalding. But I don't teach exactly what either of them teaches. And I like the freedom of being able to, which, by the way, both of these guys do the same thing. When they're teaching a course, even though the lesson plan may be A, B, and C, and they see that there's a perceived need, maybe the students have mastered A, B, and C, so we don't need to spend 2 hours on a draw stroke from concealment. We could spend 20 minutes on that, and then we could get into something that they need. And I love to be able to sort of ad lib like that to make sure, as you hit on earlier, you're giving the students what they need, not just saying, well, check these boxes. I spent this amount of time on all these different topics.
Yeah, no, 1,000%. The other part of that is the ability to, kind of freelance when you see an issue, right? Even though it's coming up somewhere in the program or in the material later in your bullet points, you're like, oh, we can address this right now and get back to your regularly scheduled program. So it's like the ability to just stop, free float a little bit, and get with that guy and say, hey, listen, while I saw something going on, let's address this right now, because it's going to crop up and it's starting to happen with maybe student A, B, or C, whatever the case is. And so we need to work on this right now before we can even progress to the rest of the next day, 2 days, 5 days, whatever's going on. So let's just, while it's here and while the question has been asked by the student, let's just fix it now. And then, so we've skipped the 12:45 segment, gone to the 2:45 a.m. segment, right? Or whatever it is. And here we are, right? Yeah. And then everything just flows right back into normal program.
I love that. And, being able to tailor the course to meet the needs of the student is just absolutely, absolutely critical. One of the things, for me being a law enforcement for 26 years, I know, and you hit on that institutional inbreeding, I think is the term used. And I've heard that term before. And by that, for people who may not understand, we're talking about, particularly in larger agencies, but even in some mid-sized and even smaller agencies, it's, you think you know all the answers with your instructor cadre. So then this instructor cadre stands by this curriculum, which becomes stagnant. And if you're teaching the same stuff today that you were teaching 10 or 15 years ago, you probably stopped learning 10 or 15 years ago, because things do progress. Now, I mean, hopefully you don't completely abandon what you were teaching and say, oh, I taught all those people absolutely wrong. Now I'm doing this. If you do, then at least you figured it out. But hopefully you were on the right track. But there should be little tweaks in a curriculum over time. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 1,000%. I said this in a interview a couple of years back. And they asked me, a lot of the standard question about teaching, training, all the things, what I would do differently. I said, if I could go back to when I started, I would probably refund everybody's money. Right. And they're like, what? I feel like, I'm like, you got to understand, right? It's not necessarily that we were wrong what we were teaching them or giving them. It's that that's what we knew. It's what we had been programmed with. It's what we knew. It's what was good at the time. It's what was better at the time. And then, progressing through your own training cycles through the years and development as an instructor or trainer, coach, and carrying that on, you realize, really wasn't the greatest at this. This really wasn't the greatest thing. But man, it was what we knew at the time. It's what we had and what we were dealing with and what we had been taught. And then being able to change that over the years and consistently changing curriculums. I mean, I can go back to curriculums from 2002, right, in notebooks, and go, oh man, that was, why would I ever do that right now? Right. Yeah. I wouldn't, but I could do it differently or say it differently.
Yeah. And, there's been there's been few times where I've been teaching a class and I see a student doing something wrong and I correct the student. There's even been times I've corrected the student more than once. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, wait a minute, let me try that the way he was doing it. Sometimes the students, it could be a beginning student who doesn't have anywhere near the depth of knowledge that you have or the skill that you have, but they just accidentally do something that if you're open-minded, you can say, dude, maybe that's not exactly right, but that if I tweak that and do this, then I have something better than I came with. I mean, that's a pretty cool feeling.
When I see those moments or I look at those things, I kind of replay tapes in my head and go, this is something that I need to note down that this person did, or this person explained why they were doing it. That would ultimately probably help me with another student 5 years down the road or 3 years down the road. Occasionally I have a friend of mine that teaches a lot of like basic CPL type courses, carry prevent courses and stuff. And once in a while I'll jump in on one and just like hang targets for them and like watch the line. Cause I like to see like those other light bulb moments go on or what the little nuances that people are having issues with, especially as, guns change, programs change for people are just really first timers. So I like seeing that, sitting in on some of those classes and experiencing that again. Cause I remember those days in the 90s, right? And watching those and helping out with them at the local shops going, oh, this is what it was like again. Okay. But man, this makes sense, right? Or what this person is currently doing because of they're 78, 82 years old and they have arthritis in one hand and a bad shoulder. And the way they're holding a gun makes a little bit more sense. Like just little things like that.
Was it hard for you to break into training law enforcement, not having a law enforcement background? Or by the time you did that, did you already have such a pedigree and such a skill that it was pretty easy for them to buy into what you were doing?
There was already enough of it. It's always tough, I think, in certain environments to break in on that side. Either, the mill, le.gov stuff, it's all interesting. Even though we know they constantly source outside instructors from outside their own programs, right? And that's a huge thing. It wasn't, the early days for me of my life, 35 plus million years ago, right? I started working for a local sheriff's department for 16 years, worked through corrections for a long time through that period. I ended up doing a reserve training job down in New Orleans as an instructor for one of the departments down there. And this is all, not even applicable to this day and age anywhere for me, but yeah, it was tough at first, right? They look at you and go, well, what are you going to teach us? What do we know, right? What do you know about this? Like, well, there's some things I kind of figured out over the years of this. And I've trained with a lot of really interesting people outside of the normal space of instructors at the time. And most people forget this, that through like the late 90s to early 2000s, especially, there wasn't a lot of places to go teach and train. Right. There was not, unless you could get behind the curtain. Like you were going to Shaw's at Mid-South. Maybe it was Smith & Wesson Academy. Maybe it was Gunsight. Maybe it was Colt. There wasn't a lot of those places. There was not, unless you had badge or good credentials from .govs. You weren't getting into a lot of these places as a Joe average citizen. And then you had to rely on that information being passed back down. So yeah, it was difficult at first. Totally progressed from that point on. It's not uncommon with a lot of contracts through the year with agencies for a lot of stuff now. They're always looking outside their own, which is great because they absolutely need it.
And then once they see you, cops are kind of like show me, don't tell me type of people, And a lot of times in a class, you'll see guy like this, like, what the hell is this guy going to? He's from the competition world. What the hell does he know about, you know what I'm saying? There's always that guy. But I think nowadays cops are pretty open-minded and they realize that the training that they're getting from their department probably is more of a qualification checkbox type thing than actually training that's going to help them be more proficient at what they're doing. So, there's, I hate to say that word lazy, but there's lazy people in every profession, and that includes law enforcement, and they're going to do the minimum. They're not going to train unless they're being paid to train. And it's always amazing when you go to teach an open enrollment course and you think, man, these guys, the last thing on their mind is when's lunch, or where are we going for lunch? They are absolutely hanging on every word. They are here. They've paid their own money. They're spending their own time, and they really, really want to be here. Whereas in law enforcement, because there's so many other things, it's not just firearms training, right? There's medical training, there's driving training, there's court, there's all these other things that you have to do. And it just, at some point, it's easy to get a little burned out and just become complacent with the training that you already have and the skill that you've already attained.
Yeah, it's been interesting to watch the change in the last, I'll call it 20 years, right? I was told I had to be here because I needed to get some remedial training, or I'm an instructor at the agency, so I need to come here and take away some stuff and look and see what's happening in the rest of the world outside of what we were doing. And that's occasionally, I just wrapped up a course in Wisconsin with some really great SWAT teams, some awesome dudes that really came in, were really hungry to learn. And it was great to see, right? We're seeing that progression That's changing pretty much in the past decade, right? I'll call it at least the past decade. It's getting more and more and more and more and more across the entire training industry spectrum, which is great to see. It absolutely is. And it's great to see the effects that are happening and the changes internally that some of these guys are getting to happen, right? They're starting to send younger guys to firearm schools. So it's been nice.
I want to talk about Magpul Dynamics. I know that's something that's probably near and dear to your heart. You spent a lot of time there. But I'll say this. So I've had the opportunity to train with Chris Costa a few times, excellent instructor. I've met and trained very minimally so far with Travis Haley, another awesome dude. I was there when there was an event when the Incog X holster that Travis designed was released by Safariland, which is a great holster, by the way. But I really love Travis Haley's approach. It's kind of like, it's very scientific based, and he's a really good instructor, very articulate. But one of the things that I told him, and I wasn't blowing smoke, I'm totally serious, and I'll tell you the same thing, is those Magpul Dynamics videos paved the path for a generation of firearms instructors. It sort of made being a trainer or participating in tactical training cool. I mean, it was like, for lack of a better term, it's like almost like the way it's edited and everything. It was sort of like an MTV video back in the day or something. It's very, whereas before that, you remember the videos we used to watch, which were
Lodi, Paladin,
going way back to VHS. Yeah. And I would put in one of these things, and it was painful to watch, brother. It was painful. And if my girlfriend was around, or kids are like, "What are you watching?" But I would watch those things, and I would pay money for them. And if I could take one or two little things out of there, and that really doing that research and watching all those things really, really gives you a good idea about not just concepts or even just techniques, but about how you relay information. And I think that's something that I'm always looking for. If I take your class, for instance, it's like, I already know how to shoot. There's some things that you can teach me, I'm sure. But what I'm really looking for is, how are you getting your point across to people? And is that something that I can incorporate into the things that I teach?
1,000%. That was a very interesting time in life to be a part of, right? It was great. They definitely brought training back mainstream, made it sexy, made it obtainable, right? Got so, like, the number of kids, I'll say kids, that I get in courses now, it's like, hey man, like, I remember sitting with my dad or my uncle and that, watching these videos, when I was like, oh my God, I'm getting old. This is horrible, or dudes that were deployed during that time. Like, hey man, those videos kept us going, in downtime between deployments. We're always watching the DVDs, trying to figure this out, trying to get better at this, or whatever the case was. So it was cool to be a part of that era, right? It was an amazing thing that Magpul had thrown together. Obviously, starting out with, Chris and Travis, adding more and more to the staff over those years. And it was a great time. I'm not going to lie. I learned a lot, not just behind the scenes manufacturing side of the house, but just about what it looked like being on the road even more than what I was previously, because I'd already been on the road traveling, teaching a lot of courses. And then that opportunity came along. It was a good time. Had a lot of fun with Chris and Travis. We still talk over, every so often, we're on the phone, and we're always back and forth trying to figure out, I was just in Idaho teaching, course, and Chris wasn't too far away. I'm like, hey, where are you? He goes, oh, I'm in Ohio right now. Where are you? I'm like, I'm in your backyard teaching. He's like, why does it always happen this way?
That's funny.
It's just miserable when that does happen. But, it was a great thing to be a part of. It really, truly was.
It's cool, man. In our industry, it's small enough. We talk about this on some other podcasts. It's small enough that you can meet these dudes who had so much influence on you. And it's always refreshing when you meet them and they're actually a good dude, and they're the type of guy that you think they are when you watch their videos. I've had the other as well. They say never meet your heroes, right? Because you're going to probably be disappointed. But no, those guys, I think, set a great example and set the tone. And it's almost like Cooper or anything else. Like, whether you agree with everything they do or not, you have to respect the fact that if not for them, we may not be where we're at now and have the opportunities to make a living training people.
You don't always have to see eye to eye with somebody about anything in this world. God knows we see that enough every day right now in the news. You don't have to see eye to eye with them, and you don't have to hate them for their views, right? But their views, their information is based on their experiences. 30 years prior to us, or whatever the case is, right? There are a lot of times you guys are like, well, if we've all seen the rhetoric that comes up online about it. I'm like, yeah, but, right, dude makes a point about this, or this versus A or B, right? So understanding that while you may not necessarily agree 100% with what they're telling you because your current favorite instructor of the month is teaching you something else or saying something else, you also have to look a little bit deeper at the depth of what is being said, because they have a valid point. They absolutely do. And nobody is 100% right. Nobody owns all the keys in this kingdom.
Yep.
Zero.
No,
nobody has them.
It's way too, dude, it's too spread out for everyone to be the best at everything. Like, for instance, I knew you were an instructor for Magpul Dynamics back in the day, but I didn't know, like, there's the art of the precision rifle. I've never seen that one. And I know you were a primary instructor on that one, but back then the furthest thing from my mind was, rifle shooting. I was a carbine and pistol guy because that's all I cared about. I was a cop and that's what I did. So I've seen those DVDs, but not that one. So it's just like, but now I would really like that one. Not that I'm some expert at long range shooting now, but over the years I've gotten into hunting and I've kind of broadened my horizons a little bit, which I love hunting, by the way. And I want to talk to you about that. I kind of started with waterfowl, just like I think you mentioned you did, but I was already a very experienced pistol and carbine shooter by that time. And so all of my training was tactical. So it's always very sight focused, right? And then now you try to put your dot on a sporting clay, or you try to put your dot on a duck and you're going to miss it, right? So even though I understand what you're supposed to do, it's hard to get myself to do that. But that's kind of the challenge of it. It's fun to experiment and do different things like that. And even something that you're very familiar with, if you go to a course with an open mind, you may gain a different perspective. That's happened to me over and over again.
Absolutely. It's interesting to watch, right? That a lot of dudes will only train inside their own space. They won't get outside their comfort zones per se, right? They'll kind of be like, well, I'm really good at handguns, so I'm going to go take a handgun class and I'm going to go show the instructor what I know. Versus going there with something else and saying, like, I need to go to this course and see what else I can learn.
100%
right?
accurate.
And that's a very big one that we see a lot often. Yeah, the hunting thing is wild, man. I love it. It's that you bring up is a totally different perspective on everything in the world. It's been my livelihood growing up as a kid, so it's been outstanding. And now, translating a lot of the things that we learned in one space to the other, especially in the shooting side of the house, right? So I do a lot of pistol hunting. I love to hunt with handguns. I've been doing that for eons. Started out with a slew of Thompson Center Contenders, all the way up to, some of my modern handguns today. Love it, right? And dots are a real thing, especially as these change and we get older and they make a world of difference on the hunting side of the house. Yeah. And not just waterfowl hunting, deer hunting, big dangerous game. It is a very real deal.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right there. The hunting is strange too. So there's different types of hunting, right? So if you're going duck hunting, I'm not sure how much of that event is going to translate into personal defense. But if you're doing dangerous game hunting, there's a lot of correlation there. And so, but I think it's important for any type of hunting just to have the mindset that you can put your sights on a living, breathing thing and press the trigger. I mean, is shooting a deer different than shooting from a person? Absolutely it is. But it's understanding that you can press the trigger and that you will press the trigger, and it's for different applications. We're talking from a hunting standpoint, for food, there's a lot of different reasons that people hunt, the camaraderie and everything else. And by the way, for non-hunters, actually pressing the trigger is such a small part of the whole hunting experience. That's not what we're there for. That's a kind of a byproduct of it. But anyway, I don't want to talk the whole time about hunting, but yeah, I absolutely see a lot of, I kick myself, like, why wasn't I hunting 30 years before I was, you know what I mean? So I do really think that that's beneficial. And there's also things like, if you're stalking through the wood and stuff like that, that has a practical application where it teaches you how to walk quietly and stuff like that. And some of that stuff could come into play. It's not an exaggeration that type of movement may come into play if someone were to break into your house and you're creeping around the corner. I mean, if you have an open mind, you can see that a lot of these things are sort of related.
There's always some interchangeability. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to talk about some of the courses that you offer at Sentinel. And I know it's a wide array of courses, but tell us a little bit about the types of courses you offer and maybe what you may be offering that's different than some of the other instructors out there. Because here's the thing. In this day and age, it's not that there's not enough information, it's that it's information overload. And everybody has a platform, right? And so, but when everybody has a platform, that means you're getting information from some people who don't know what the hell they're talking about. So that's a real thing as well.
Yeah, in today's industry space, right, where we're at, everybody is generally teaching the same process of some sort, right? It's a fundamental process of, drawing the gun, gripping the pistol, drawing the gun, either aligning sights or getting what today is considered, target focused, threat focused, / soft sight picture, flash sight picture, right, to red dots. It's all the same. Nothing has changed, right? Like we talked about this earlier. With some guys that I had, they're like, oh, I remember shooting occluded in the 2000s. It was in the Aimpoint manual, right, when they were transitioning in the military aspect of them. Yeah, close the front lens cover, and now you're shooting occluded, superimpose a dot, press the trigger. Nothing is new under the sun. Nobody has invented a new grip. Nobody has invented a new way to press a trigger. Nobody has invented anything new in this space. It's just who they are reaching differently or how they do it and present it in their program.
Yeah.
There is no new way that I have found to put my hands on a Glock pistol. There's no new ways I've found to put my hands on a wheel gun, right? Or how to mount a shotgun or a carbine. It has all been done before. It is not new in the least bit. There's just different takes on it and ways to be proficient as far as sooner or faster when you're shooting. Recoil mitigation is recoil mitigation. It's all these things are the same. Nothing has really progressively opened up the doors probably since the early 2000s, right? We haven't seen anything that different. But when we look at it, right, a slew of handgun courses, right? There's baseline pistol stuff, which is like a handgun diagnostic course. Why am I missing? It's a one-day breakdown of what am I doing incorrectly or what am I doing correctly and don't even realize it.
You mean you don't just show them that chart that says low left? Oh, you're doing.
I've got one of those somewhere that says don't do this. Don't do this, right? Kind of thing. And if people actually look back to that chart, they would realize it was really designed around like one-handed pistol shooting marksmanship of the United States military and the Army way back in the day, right?
Small point. Yeah,
it's fun, right? And who cares about that? Slow is smooth or something. I don't know. God, I hate the internet. But can I say that?
You can.
Good. But parts of it, right? I think out of everything in the courses that I do teach, so like my favorite ones to do are shotgun and low light, white light applications. I like teaching a lot of white light stuff. I like teaching a lot of shotgun. It's, 37% of the households in America have one kind of deal, looking at some of the last stats. Great gun, absolutely an underlooked tool, especially in the day of the carbines, because everybody likes a carbine because it holds 30 bullets or 40 or whatever it is they have, and it's a go fast gun. And it is a great gun.
What's your take, Steve, on red dots on a shotgun?
So I am a believer in them to one extent or another, right? Are they needed? No, especially at 7 to 10 yards in most houses. Law enforcement, I would say yes, especially if that agency is running the applications of dual ammunition, right? Slug or buck. I like dots when I shoot slugs, especially for distance. Do I need them? No. Does it make me shoot the gun sooner? Yes, absolutely it does. Makes life easier. Now, as aging eyes transitions in that issue, sure, absolutely. If you got it on a handgun, a carbine, why not have it on a shotgun? But if you look at most of my guns, I have a few with dots. I have a few without dots, and most of the ones I grab will be the ones without dots currently, just because it's not the tool that I need it for. So, but understanding them, yeah, absolutely. There's a place for them to be on a shotgun.
Yeah. What other, like for a home defense setup for a shotgun, what do you recommend besides a light?
A good usable sight, right? If I take, an average gun, most people would be served well with like just having a bead sight 870 barrel with an XS big dot sight on the front. Big glowing golf ball on the front of the gun works great. 7 yards, maybe 10 for a long shot in the house, loaded with a decent load of ammunition. And as I go through the pecking order, I don't need an 8-round magazine tube on my gun. I like a lighter balanced gun. 5 to 6 rounds, is great for what I'm doing with it. Secondary ammunition on the gun to at least give me 50% plus of the capacity back of the gun as I top that gun off. Sure, if people want an 8-round tube, have at it, man. It's not my gun, not my world, not my life. I choose what I choose for me based on where I live and what I do. So nothing wrong with that. But definitely usable sights, definitely a good white light is like the first and foremost on that gun. After that, man, it's ammunition. Realistically,
yeah. So and slings are critical for duty use, right? Because it serves as like the holster for your shotgun or long gun. But what are your thoughts on a sling for home defense applications? Pros and cons. What are your thoughts?
I'm a negative on this on a sling in the house, right? I'm not trying to go hands on with somebody. I'm not trying to drag and move injured or wounded at that point, even if, right. I'm also not, carrying the gun around and transitioning to a secondary tool at 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock, whatever in the morning. I probably don't have a pistol.
When you're in your boxers, yeah. It's just you and your shotgun in your boxers. Yeah.
Throw this, run back to the room, grab the pistol. No, it's not going to happen, guys, right? That's just not the case. For me, I like to keep them simple, easy. Most people don't know how to pick up a sling in their hand and manage to sling any pump gun or semi-auto at any given time because it's not really taught in many places like it used to be for us. So no, for me on the house gun, no sling, don't need it. Not applicable to me in my life at that particular time. Now, I will say that one of the ranch guns that does hang out, an old Benelli M1 Super 90 gun, does have a sling on it because I will often take that gun on walkabout on the property. So that one gets a sling.
As a guy who has a lot of influence on product development and you have for years, how much weight do you put into gear and accessories versus skill? I don't know if I said that appropriately or not, but yeah.
I would definitely rather take, like, it's kind of the old adage of beware the man with one gun. Right. He knows how to use it. It's like a secondary tool back of his hand kind of thing. Like he's known it his whole entire life. Right. I subscribe to a thing of if that accessory helps you and it's not something you have to work around, but it's something that solves a definitive problem, then yes, absolutely put it on the gun.
But you should know why you're putting it on your gun before you do it, because next thing you know, your gun's going to weigh 47 pounds. And now it's detrimental, all those things, as opposed to being helpful. So yeah, I'm kind of a minimalist as well. But yeah, if something like red dot makes something easier, I'm all about it. And for years, for decades, we've had red dots on carbines and stuff. And then that commonality of technique from the sight picture from that to your pistol, to your shotgun, I think is another huge advantage. But yeah, like you said, I'm 53 and I think I held out till about 48 before my close vision is like, I need longer arms, to read stuff. But so in that regard, red dot is just so beneficial. So other courses that you teach long range rifle as well, right?
I don't really do any long range rifle stuff. I leave that to what I would consider like the experts in the field.
Okay.
Right? There's some dudes out there, like, while I know how to do things and I know how to do certain, there are guys that do it way better than I do. Right. And I stay out of that wheelhouse. While I have a rack of long guns that are more than capable of it, and I still like to go and do it and I enjoy it, it's not something I'm going to go out of my way to teach. Right. Some baseline rifle courses that will take guys out to 300, 400, 500 yards of their carbines. Absolutely. Right. That should just be a given. We did it with iron sights for 1,000,000 years. So people should understand that the carbine is just not a quote unquote go fast up close assaulter's tool. Right. It is a gun that is capable right to distance, and people won't explore that with their current setups or gear. Like a favorite one of mine. I was up at Thunder Ranch co-teaching a class with Jack and Clint, the guys, a while back.
Awesome guy. Love Jack.
Jack's a great dude, good friend. Colton, I've known Clint and Heidi for a long time. Absolutely great people as well. And so about a year plus ago, I was up teaching a course. We were kind of doing a scramble between like my urban carbine and their urban carbine class. We just said, man, we're going to go out and because we're all friends. Let's just go hang out and shoot guns together and get a bunch of people in. Like, yeah, why not? And I brought a 14 5-inch carbine, 5.56 gun, nothing overly ridiculous on it. Running a little known Aimpoint model that's really not out there much, the M5 Bravo, which has adjustable turrets. So it gives you up to like 8.5 MOA of adjustment on top of the turret on basically a comp M5, right? Wasn't out very long, whatever the reasons being, not my deal, but absolutely a very great optic. And Jack is looking at me like, Colton's like, I don't know. flipped up my 3X behind it, dialed the 4. Okay, great. Get on their 400-yard target. It's like, dude, you're just crushing that thing at 400 yards. What's it doing at, mid-range between that? And, from 4 to 460 yards, it's on C zones, right? The guy's like, what in the world? And then I said, watch this. 4 dot high, tack it on the 550-yard dude. The guy's like, I'm like, hey, man, look, the guns are capable. The ammunition is capable. Just are you and what sighting systems? But you can do it with a dot and a magnifier. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, but have you messed with the Duty RDS MR yet?
I've had some in courses. I don't have one personally, but I have seen a couple in courses. It's been a pretty solid dot, though, from the guys that I've seen and talked to that have been using them right now.
Yeah, developed at the behest of some professional users. So, but because people are saying, well, why would Aimpoint come out with, a multi-reticle when forever that's been there? Well, because somebody asked for it, because they want Aimpoint's reliability, durability, but they just had a need, this particular group, for a multi-reticle. So they're like, hey, why not make this available?
Yeah, because nobody needed that for 300 blackout changing between sonics and subsonic ammo. Nobody needed that. I mean, maybe, I don't know, possibly, but yeah, nobody knows that. But yeah, it's not that big a secret, but it's out there, to a degree. And it is. It's a viable optic. I like having the option of holds.
Yeah.
Well, so why wouldn't you?
You've worked for with some other optic companies, and obviously you. I think it's safe to say you're a fan of Aimpoint as well. But what do you look for in an optic, and would you caution someone whose approach to purchasing a red dot is, well, this one's $250, so I'm going to get this one versus the one that's $550?
Being in the position I'm in right now, I had the benefit of using them all, right? I play with everybody's optics on all the guns, on all the things all the time, right? I'm always constantly switching gear. Aimpoint has been the staple, in my safes and on my guns for decades. I tell guys this, right? Outside of a couple of things, like one, always get the best you can afford, right? That's always a thing. But I tell guys, if you want and you're looking for higher quality, right? Something that's going to be your buy once, cry once optic that's going to last you with an outstanding warranty over the years, it's going to be an Aimpoint, right? I mean, the most bomb-proof optic I own probably is right now an M4S. That's on some of my guns, right? The thing is indestructible. It's been through all kinds of garbage with me, and it is a great optic. But I tell people this, because again, having that benefit of being just kind of independent of everything, I tell guys, one, buy what you can afford, right? I'm not going to tell you that you need a $700 optic on this gun when you can only afford a $200 optic on your $500 gun, whatever the case is. But I will tell people, if you're going to buy something, you want something that is Aimpoint quality, Aimpoint controlled, and the only thing to do that is Aimpoint.
Yeah, and I mean, if you're getting a red dot just to go plinking with, then maybe that's not that critical. But if it's a defensive
Correct.
Firearm, then yeah, or a duty firearm, that's really key. And I think everybody has pretty much come around to red dots now. Even the naysayers, there's still a few that I know that are very, very prominent shooters who are just like, I'm not going to a red dot. But my thing is like, dude, sure. Why would you deprive yourself of something that's going to make it easier for you? That doesn't make sense.
Why would you not work on easy mode at this stage in the game, right? Absolutely. I tell guys, I get a lot of questions, right? Because I run a lot of acro P2s and, the new dot, the COA on my guns, right? Yeah. And I like the new Aimpoint. It's absolutely a really good dot. I've got 2-3 of them on pistols right now.
Isn't that, you're talking about the Koa?
Yeah, the Koa is
dude, I love that. Yeah, I have one on my Glock 48. It's just the mount, the way it mounts, everything about it. I mean, okay, am I a shill for Aimpoint? No. Do I work with Aimpoint? Yes, but there are other companies that also have legitimate things, and there are companies that don't have as good of an optic. And so I think that, the Koa is well, that's what I carry. So, and I purchased it, so it wasn't a freebie. So what does that say?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's an outstanding dot. If I had like one druther right about certain dots, is that I wish some of the manufacturers would clean up the diodes a little bit more and or the glass to stop having squiggles and comets and cupids out of what they would consider dots.
Yep.
And I explained this to some buddies at Aimpoint a while back. I'm like, please, for the love, give me a 1 MOA dot. I hunt with a lot of these dots on my guns. Being here in Michigan and some of the other areas that I hunt, I may only get 100 yards.
Yeah.
And I shoot a lot of stuff on the move. I have a lot of deer, hogs on the move in other states. And I'm like, and I also have a time and place where I just like a more refined point dot at distances. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of good variables out there right now.
Now for pistol stuff, what's your preference on dot size?
That's interesting. I'm generally hovering in that 2 to 3 MOA area. That's kind of a good generalization. On some little itty bitty guns that I have dots on, I used to gravitate towards like a 6 MOA dot, just because the littler guns were tracking a little bit differently for me at the time in early days of dots on pistols. And I really liked the larger dot. It was just able to kind of like, I won't say pick up, but it returned better for me having a little bit larger dot. But again, right, it's all perception and size anyways with dot and dot intensity, because 3 I'm away at 100 yards, and inside of that distance, I'm well under an inch, to a half an inch. It's just a perception of the intensity of the dot at those distances anyway. But yeah, generally about somewhere in that 2 to 3 MOA is where I kind of live.
Yeah, that makes sense to me too. Kind of a general purpose size. Tell us about your RDS class. How long is it, and who's it for? Is it for someone brand new to red dots, or someone who has a little experience, or
both? Right, there's a big mix in that course. I've been teaching a lot of RDS courses to agencies over the last decade. Right, since my first red dot was in 1999 on a Smith & Wesson 5906. I mean, it was a Tasco Optima 2000 dovetailed, so it's nothing new in us. But the red dot class, generally, there's different packages for that, right? Obviously, contract courses with law enforcement agencies, they go upwards of 5 days, right? Which is a long time, but that's what they want.
And is that end user, or is that instructor level course?
That's instructor development.
Okay.
That's instructor.
And then they would typically put their officers probably through like a, what do you think is industry standard now? A 2-day transition?
2 days.
Yeah.
A lot of them are 2 days. I see a lot that are coming in as 1 day, where they'll go in and they'll teach 8 to 9 bullet points in that day, because that's all they have, because they're trying to cycle, 10,000, 20,000 people through this program in the year. So a lot of it gets broken down into a 1-day format. I mean, anymore today's day and age, red dot classes, realistically, outside of certain SOPs and drills and exercises to be taught, are going away to the most part, other than the instructor development stuff, because any class you go to anymore is a red dot pistol class.
Yeah.
It's just a handgun class with a different sighting system at this stage of the game. But going at department level, federal level stuff that I've been teaching in the past year or two, most recently has been, 3 to 4 days on the instructor level courses.
That's like Eric Maudsley, who's a buddy of mine, really skilled instructor. He teaches at a gun site, and he teaches a 5-day red dot pistol course. But what it is it's a 250 course. And yeah, that's the thing. There's different schools of thought on this. So
sure,
because, a lot of people, I forget who I was talking to the other day. I think it was Kelly McCann. He goes, if you're teaching a 2-day red dot course, what do you do for the second day and a half? I get what he's saying. But of course, in the 5-day course, what you get is you get more time on the gun, which brings me to another point that I'd like to ask you, because you have so much knowledge about the red dot stuff, is what do you think the learning curve is like? Because I think some people, they may think, there may be something to this red dot stuff, but they don't want to unlearn what they've been learning forever with the iron sights. So what kind of learning curve can you expect from someone who's an experienced, say a moderately trained iron sight pistol shooter, and they're going to transition to a red dot for the first time?
2 hours.
Wow. Yeah. That's impressive.
You give 2 hours, 2 to 4 hours of like correct instruction on the dot, right? And what they need to do with the dot as far as that, and how to pick up the dot in their presentation, why they may necessarily be having some issues picking up the dot and being presented with, or getting the dot presented well. Like I do the demo in class, and I do it all the time. I'm like, so who has an issue picking up the red dot? 1 or 2 people raise their hand. I said, all right, come on up here. I said, all I want you to do is A, B, and C, show them it, look at it, and within 5 to 10 draws, they're 90% on picking up the dot, 80 to 90%. I'm like, cool, just do that the rest of the day, and then we'll keep tweaking as we go along. It's always been about the grip, the presentation, and how they're focused.
I remember I handed a pistol with a red dot to one of our administrators, and we've had some great administrators. Seems like sometimes I bag on them, but I just bring up the little points I remember. And I handed this pistol. I was all proud of it because I had a red dot on it, to this administrator. And he picks it up and he kind of points down range and is doing one of these things. And it's like, I don't like it. It's like, dude, first of all, you didn't fire a round. Second of all, you have no idea what you're doing. That you're not, this is not going to bring the dot into view, no matter where it's at. No. So yeah, it does take, you have to have an open mind. And if you do have an open mind, I think like you mentioned, it can be a pretty accelerated learning curve. Now, I wouldn't get a red dot on a pistol and immediately start carrying that, right? Just like I wouldn't do that with anything. You have to go out and you have to make sure that it's going to be capable of what you think it is. And you have to make sure that you're going to be capable of using it effectively. If you don't know that, if you haven't confirmed that through training, and hopefully some more realistic training than just plinking away at a, B27 silhouette at 7 yards, then you can go out there with some confidence because you know what you can do and what you can't do.
Absolutely. It's one of those tools, accessory things that we have gotten on guns that has really become so mainstream now. And it's funny because we talk about it and go, this is from the 80s, guys. They've just gotten smaller, right, and bigger. I mean, if you look back, right, one off my 22 bullseye gun, right, an old Aimpoint 1000, right.
Awesome.
These are what we had, guys, right.
Awesome.
Still works to this day. I mean, still use it on stuff. I mean, this is not new. It's just the technology is getting better and making it more accessible and smaller for us to put them on what we would consider a carry gun or defensive duty use gun anymore.
Yeah.
But it's funny you mentioned Kelly, aka Jim Grover back in the day.
Yeah.
I mean, it was 2000s, and there he was with a Glock 34.
Yeah.
With one of the old, not Seymours, but one of either the Tascos or Burst or somebody, whoever it was at the time, milled into a Glock that I think Dave Bowie did for him.
Yeah.
So this is how far back this goes, and everybody's like, "Man, dots are they're exciting." I'm like,
same. We just had Kelly on, and he was talking to that because he's the first person that I knew commercially that was using like a modern red dot. Like there were other competitors who were using red dots that were much larger, almost like a scope for a handgun is what they look like. But Kelly, back in the day, I don't know when those videos came out when he was using that, but it was early on. And he said he was using it for years before that video even came out. So yeah, they're no big deal. It's Dave Spalding says something interesting. Like instead of looking for the dot, just drive the muzzle to the target. And the dot, as long as you're gripping properly, the dot will probably be there. If the dot's not there, it's just a minor adjustment of some kind. It's never this,
Right. You're never swimming. You're never swimming around for this thing.
Yeah.
And even then, like we explained to guys, especially on the LE side as well, it's like, hey man, even if you don't find the dot, fill the window full of meat and shoot the gun if you're within proximity.
Yeah. Are you surprised though at some of the kind of flippant responses you get from people who don't really know how to who to teach red dots? And I've seen an instructor who I consider a mentor in a way, very, very skilled guy, very experienced guy. But he was telling people, look for the dot. Look for the front sight and then find the dot. Dude, if you're doing that, you are inherently slower and you're reinforcing what you're trying to unlearn, which is don't use the dot as a front sight. Now, I have talked to a professional shooter who's better than I could ever hope to be, phenomenal shooter. And he told me that's true, but there is a certain point of distance where, it does become more similar to a front sight. But particularly at typical distances that we consider handgun distances, say inside of 15 yards, you're not using it as a front sight. You're staring you're focused on the threat, which is what you're going to do instinctively.
Yeah, even for me, like when I hunt with one on my pistols, which several of them, I'm always remaining target focused, threat focused, whatever it is at that case people want to use for vernacular. And for me, when it comes down to it, when I start shooting them at longer distances, because I do, and I get so driven and so focused intently on that dot, like I would a front sight, especially when I start shooting past 75 yards. And it's like, okay, great. Well, 50 to 75 out in that world, then I get way more dot fixated and I've refined of my aiming point for that particular task.
And then, what you said is absolutely true. And to piggyback on that, an optic will enable you to shoot with both eyes open more easily, I think, than with irons. So with irons, I first was taught, close my eye, right? Then I very soon learned, dude, both eyes open. You have more peripheral vision, more awareness of what's going on around you, this and that. You don't need to squint one eye. But let's say I'm at 25 yards and I'm trying to make a headshot with a pistol with iron sights. I find my non-dominant eye, which is my left eye, really squints. It's not completely closed, but in order to get that sight picture more refined with my old eyes, I kind of do everything that I can. But with a red dot, it's a lot easier.
It's so much simpler. We'll see it. There's always going to be holdouts no matter what you do with technology. There's always going to be holdouts. Well, this has worked for me for this long. Well, it's worked for you for this long because you haven't done this and tried this and understand it, or to use it and to see what it could actually do for you. And while that's great, hey, I'm happy your front sights still work for you at 70 years old and you can still see that, because I sure can't. I mean, I still can, but not that well, right? Well, and they'll work within certain parameters.
Yeah.
But how well are they going to work in low light, right?
Yep.
How well are these things going to handle for you on movers?
Yep.
All the little variables that come to the equation that the red dot helps us with.
Steve, what advice would you have for someone who's interested in maybe transitioning to a red dot on their pistol, but they're afraid because they worry about battery life, they worry about this is, electronic device, those types of things? Any validity to those concerns these days?
No. Early days, right? We still had a lot of issues with these things during development, right? Failures of the rheostats, failures of electronic packages, whatever the case was, robustness, durability, all those things.
Battery life was a thing.
Yeah. Battery life was absolutely a thing. And then, people were complaining because there's, coatings on, tint on the lenses to help with the battery life and elongate that. The problem is this, right? You charge your cell phone every night. People put their cell phone on a charger. They'll do this. And in the early days, it was tough because everything was a bottom battery. So you had to take it off the gun, remove it, reinstall it, put it back, narf up the screws, potentially reconfirm, re-zero the gun, which you should do anyways. But now today, there's no excuse, right? The battery change is simple. It's easy. If you're within the whatever, I tell people I change the batteries out on my carry guns twice a year.
Yep. Can't go wrong.
They get changed. Nope, twice a year on my carry guns, training guns, class guns, once a year at the beginning of the training season, because they get turned off when they go in the safe. I'm not carrying them, so I don't leave the batteries on. It's usually a training, teaching gun of some sort. Batteries go off, put them in the safe. No big deal. Gun comes out at the beginning of the year. Yeah, maybe there's a couple I'll play with and use. I stopped taking notes on battery life because a lot of battery life from a lot of companies is false. They're like, well, it's 50, 60,000 hours. Well, that's at setting number 4 at 72 degrees.
Yeah. It's almost like lumens, right? Everyone gets so hung up with lumens and a light. 2,000 lumens. Okay. Well, lumens.
What's the candelas?
Yeah, exactly. Lumens tells part of the story, but there's other things involved. So interesting stuff. Well, Steve, I've loved talking to you today, brother. You're a wealth of knowledge. As we start to wind down here, what do you have going? What projects are you working on? And how can people find you on social media?
Social media is easy. It's Sentinel Concepts. It's, the Facebook page is Sentinel Concepts. I'm rarely on it because, for the most part, it's just whatever. So Sentinel Concepts on the Facebook page, and then Sentinel Concepts again on Instagram. I monitor that one a lot more. It's a little bit easier to deal with and interact with. Website, sentinelconcepts.com. That's most of the training schedule. Hosting stuff is up there. And then projects right now, interesting one I'm waiting on that we should be in the final, getting close to release phases. New shotgun coming out that was released a year ago at SHOT Show with Palmetto. I've got a lot of design patents and stuff on that particular gun with that crew and that engineering team, which was absolutely awesome to work with. There's a lot of little things just right now, and it's nothing one specific. It's just a lot of little things to play with, right? Widgets now. What are we seeing that are coming out in accessories for lights, lasers, laser technology, current stuff with guns? It's never ending, and it's not one exact thing right now. So it's just a lot of little pieces on the workbench.
Yeah. Well, kind of last thing is the industry is sort of down right now. If you call it a Trump slump or whatever people aren't paranoid that their gun rights are going to be taken immediately. So industry wide, we see kind of a downturn. Almost 10% in some of the things I've seen. What advice would you have, if any? Maybe the advice is just wait for someone who has a good idea and wants to bring some kind of product to market.
I would tell them to evaluate it fully, do a big deep dive search on what is out there, and then tell yourself and others that or you can trust, what does it solve? What problem am I trying to solve? Is it real or imagined? Right.
And work with the end user, right? Not just the engineers. Yeah.
And work with the end users on it, get the information, get the feedback from them, what they're seeing, what their problems are or their issues, and then go off of that, right? And then maybe put it back on the drawing board after getting some of that feedback and that information. It's not cheap. It is not cheap to do, but it's getting better, with 3D printing and stuff that's out there. But I would tell them, be smart about it, look at it, watch it, get it protected if you're that belief, you had that much belief in it, and sure, start the process, because it's going to take 3 to 5 years for a lot of things.
Good point.
It's never overnight unless it's, some kind of piece of metal that dudes can just machine up, slap on it, make it an extension bar for whatever optic light or something they're using. That's the low hanging fruit. The big stuff is, what are you trying to solve in the big picture for people? Good
stuff, Steve. Thanks so much for coming on today, brother. Hopefully we can train together at some point. I'd really like that.
Yeah, absolutely, Richard. Love it.
Well, guys, that's a wrap for this episode with Steve Fisher. If this episode resonated with you, be sure and let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to Aimpoint's Taking Aim podcast. We'll see you next time.